Welcome to Behavioral Health Today, a podcast brought to you by the Triad Network. This podcast is designed to share trending topics occurring within the world and our communities and bring them a behavioral and mental health perspective. Welcome to Behavioral Health Today. I'm your host, Peter Fenger, and today I'm joined by Dr. Bob Rosen. Bob is a renowned psychologist, best-selling author, and expert in personal and organizational transformation. With a PhD in clinical psychology from the University of Pittsburgh, he serves on the faculty at George Washington University's School of Medicine and has advised over 500 CEOs across 60 countries as the founder of Healthy Companies. Bob's insight has been featured in New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and Fortune magazine. His books, including Grounded and Conscious, have been bestsellers, and his latest book, Detach, Ditch Your Baggage to Live a More Fulfilling Life, explores how letting go can lead to greater fulfillment. Today, we're excited to welcome Bob to dive into key insights from his book, Detach, exploring how fear-based attachments limit us, the power of self-awareness and letting go, and the practical steps to shift from attachment to aspiration. Bob, welcome to our show.
My pleasure, Peter.
Well, I appreciate your time and excited to get into our conversation because I know you have just written your book, Detach, Ditch Your Baggage to Live a More Fulfilling Life. And you're exploring how folks can really let go and how that can lead to better fulfillment. So I want to ask, I know your previous books, Grounded and Conscious, were both bestsellers, but what inspired you to write Detach? Was there a defining moment or a personal experience that made you realize this power of detachment?
Peter, as a psychologist, I've always been a student of self-awareness and self-development.
Mhm.
And in my global travels in business, I also developed a real interest in Eastern and Western psychology. And the combination led me to really appreciate the power of positive thinking in the West and detachment in the East. But in the last couple years, I started noticing some real changes in society, global decline in overall happiness, a growing disconnection that people were feeling from each other in a sense of loneliness, a systemic anxiety that hovers over people, and higher cynicism and mistrust and resentment. And people were really becoming less comfortable in their own skins and more fearful about the direction of the world. So I wanted to write a book to address these issues so that people could feel greater success in business and in life.
Yeah. Well, I love that direction. And I've actually been very lucky enough to read a little bit of your book. So I'm very excited to sort of dive into it. And I can see some of those values sort of echo in the writing that you've done. I know in reading your book feels intentionally designed for self-reflection. You have asking probing questions and structured processes for self-awareness. How did you envision readers sort of engaging with this? And did you intend for them to follow a specific process?
Yeah, the book is designed as a personal guide to help build a more fulfilling and prosperous life. And I've come to believe that the secret is to detach, to confront and release your attachments that are standing in the way of your own success. I mean, attachments are like mental baggage. That we carry around with us, like internal conversations about ideas and ideals and people and circumstances in our life that seduce us and sabotage us and get in the way of us being our best selves. And they blind us from our own personal truth. So the question is, how can we address those issues so that we experience more joy, more freedom, and also reach our full potential?
Yeah. And you've done a very nice job of sort of outlining that path toward finding our true selves and really aligning with those potentials. You know, you've mentioned these major attachments. You've identified 10 major attachments that can hold us back. Can you walk us through what these attachments are and explain how you determine these specific ones?
Well, actually, I had a dream about 12 years ago, and I was wrapped in ropes. And I woke up and I wrote down these 10 attachments that were
Hmm.
grabbing me. And I have no idea where they came from, but I put it in the attic for about 12 years and I pulled it down and got excited about writing about it. The first one is the attachment to stability, which is really a fear of change. The second is the attachment to the past, which is really holding back bad memories of bad relationships, difficult childhood, relationships that went sour. The attachment to the future is worrying too much about the future and having expectations and outcomes rather than living in the present moment. The fourth one is the attachment to control. And this is really about controlling others, being controlled by others, being passive aggressive, or being over pleasing with other people. The next one is the attachment to perfection. And here we have to aspire to our understanding and appreciating our shortcomings and falling in love with our imperfections. The next one is the attachment to success. And this is really sort of living based on other people's expectations and not ourselves, living with a scarcity mindset rather than an abundance mindset that I am good just the way I am. The attachment to pleasure is really about indulging in pleasurable activities too often: alcohol, drugs, social media, overeating. The next one is the attachment to youth. And youth is really about being fearful of getting older and the internalized ageism that we carry around with us. The ninth one is the attachment to self. And this is really about being too self absorbed and having difficulty building relationships. And then the last one is the attachment to life. And it's not having difficulty transitioning from one phase to another and accepting that life has births and deaths along the way. Now, different people experience these attachments in very different ways. Young people, mid careers, and older workers and retirees all experience these attachments with different portfolios of attachments.
Yeah. Yeah. And what I can see is this is sort of a cyclical process. As we sort of navigate life, you've written this book as sort of a guide to sort of transcend these moments.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Fear, I think, is at the root of all of these attachments. Look, let's face it, we've experienced fear all the time in our lives, and it influences how we think, how we feel, how we act, or influence our well-being and quality of life, and even our success. In
Mhm.
fact, fear is probably our deepest emotion. Now, fear comes in many shapes and sizes,
Mhm.
and everyone's demons are different. Some people fear the truth. Other people fear the past or the future. Others fear people or places or things or success or failure, you name it. But whatever fears you have, the key is to become aware of your fears and allow yourself to experience them fully. I had my share of fears, in my early life. I came from a working class family and I had fears of financial insecurity. I had fears of not being successful,
Mhm.
fears of the future. And I had to confront them, experience them, and really change my belief systems about them. And eventually I traded my fear for love of myself and the world. And I got rid of those attachments.
Yeah. And I can really see like the wisdom that you've learned is coming through in this book. As I've had a chance to sort of read it, your book is aimed at replacing these fear-based attachments with aspirations. Can you walk us through an example of, say, moving from an attachment to an aspiration that's healthier and what that looks like?
Sure. Well, let's take a look at the attachment to success.
Sure.
When our desire for success turns into a compulsive need for achievement, then we've got a real problem because we're defining success from the outside in versus the inside out based on other people's expectations. And this is often driven by our fear of failure, which drives our attachment to success. So, for the audience, ask yourself, do you need to be successful to be happy? Do you feel like something is missing in your life? Are you envious of other people's successes? See, the secret is to live abundantly, feeling like you have everything that you need right now, not with a scarcity mindset. And by practicing abundance, we can celebrate our achievements and live a much more fulfilling life. I like to use the example of Kathy in the book. And Kathy, after 30 years of success at Arbitron, a radio ratings company, she had it all. She had a great career, loving family, community engagement, and then cancer and a downturn in the economy and a dwindling of her retirement funds hit simultaneously. And she had to do some real soul searching. And she confronted her attachment to success. And she realized that she was really small in the overall scheme of things, but she could only impact her circle of influence. So she stopped chasing success and started living more purposely in her life. So she threw out her attachment to success.
What I really appreciate is the questions. I mean, before going into the story here, some of those questions that you're asking your audience are the same questions you're sort of outlining in your book, and I've so appreciated this. And in sharing your story with Kathy, which also is a great example of some of the stories that you've included in your book, are such great examples of people sort of transcending this, control and trying to recognize our influence ripple throughout your book. Even in this story that you're talking about with Kathy, really asking yourself, what does success mean for me? And really understanding our control, we can really see how we can change our mindset to some of these aspirations that we can cultivate for ourselves.
Exactly, exactly. And what I tried to do is to build a methodology for helping people think through this. And
Yeah.
if you think of it as a four-step methodology, the first step is awareness. And here we must get in touch with what's going on inside of us, our thoughts and feelings and our perceptions, and how that translates into behavior. But we also have to understand what's going on outside of us. And until we accept the truth of what's going on inside of us and outside of us, we can't move to the second phase, which is really about grasping and understanding our attachment. What is the fear behind that attachment, whether it is the attachment to control or perfection? And what are the circumstances where this attachment shows up in our life? Which leads to the third step, which is the aspiration. And here we focus on the desired state. What do we want to have happen to make our life more fulfilling? And then lastly is about action. It's about finding the actual actions that you take to throw out that attachment and embrace your aspirations. Let me give you a quick example about that. When
Please.
we're attached to ourself, we are preoccupied by our own needs, thoughts, and feelings. And under the guise of taking care of ourselves, we withdraw from others and we don't get our intimacy needs met. And we risk becoming too attached to ourselves. But by learning to love generously, we can connect our lives to other people. And to accomplish this, we have to throw out our self-absorption. We must drill down on our underlying fears, like the fear of rejection or the fear of vulnerability or inadequacy, and then imagine what our life would be like loving generously with others, and then finally taking action. So these four steps are very important for each of the attachments.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor.
Continuing education is both a requirement and a learning opportunity, but finding the right CE provider can be challenging. AATBS, a triad company, offers continuing education for psychologists, social workers, marriage and family therapists, counselors, and behavior analysts. CE courses are available both individually and as part of our new All Access Pass. All Access Pass provides a library of over 250 unique courses. That's more than 800 hours of CEs, with new courses being added every month. As a special offer, Behavioral Health Today listeners can save 15% on CE purchases. Visit us at aatbs.com/BHT and enter promo code BHT15 during checkout. That's aatbs.com/BHT. Check out our library and check off your CE requirements today.
And you've done such a nice job of laying out what that process looks like, really starting with self-awareness and then really discovering some self-agency and really empowering folks to navigate this in a different way that really kind of taps into our gratitude and our compassion and really forming the relationships in our lives that'll really benefit ourselves.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's interesting. It's interesting. For years, I worked in business,
Uh-huh.
and I've interviewed actually face to face 500 CEOs in about 60 countries around the world of large corporations.
Yeah.
And I saw some of these attachments showing up in their lives. The best leaders were always self aware and committed to their own development. And that enabled them to craft a very progressive human strategy and a human culture inside the business. Unfortunately, we're kind of moving away from those kind of workplaces in the last year and focusing much more on performance. But the leaders who didn't get it were hijacked by their ambition, by mistrust, by performance pressures, by poor mental health, and by their controlling and perfectionistic style. They got stuck in their attachments, so to speak. Many of the leaders were attached also to control and even the future. So if you take the issue of attachment to control, from early childhood, we're taught to master our environment. We take charge, we maneuver, we manipulate to get what we want in the world. And we try to control the uncontrollable, but we hide our vulnerability. And so there's some people who control others and some people who like to be controlled by others. But the only way to get over the attachment to control is to develop trust and distinguish what you can and cannot control and allow yourself to be vulnerable and open to be influenced by other people. So vulnerability is a real strength. It's not a weakness. And the key is to be more trusting and trustworthy. So control is a really interesting attachment for business leaders.
Yeah. And I want to sort of ask, as anybody that might be navigating this workspace today and interviewing for a new job, are there any questions that you might encourage listeners to ask to help them get a sense of the work environment as it comes from the leader, to help them understand their attachments and aspirations?
Well, it's very important to draw a boundary between your issues
Yeah.
and your coworkers' issues and your boss's issues. But
Mhm.
we get sort of sucked into experiencing everybody's issues in the workplace.
Yeah.
And so it's key that we detach from the unhealthy parts of work, the unhealthy parts of our job, the unhealthy parts of leaders. Sometimes we got to deal with it because their behavior is so dysfunctional. But it's critical that we manage our own selves. And if we do that, we're freer, we're happier in the process. You know, a lot of people show up in life and they're too attached to the past, you know, and it creates a lot of negative stories. You know, we idealize or demonize our memories and we become immobilized by old emotional wounds from childhood or relationships that didn't work in the past or business deals that went sour. But if we don't face these truths directly and learn to let go, surrender,
Mhm.
and then forgive ourselves and other people, we stay stuck.
Yeah.
And so, for your audience, do you sometimes feel stuck in the past?
Mm.
Do you have trouble letting go of things, or do you often feel resentful or anxious during the day, which is oftentimes linked to these past demons? So the key is to get comfortable being uncomfortable and to deepen our emotions and then learn to surrender and forgive.
Sure. I mean, I know as I read your book, I had trouble sort of confronting some parts of my past. And you talk about rewriting negative stories and really leaning into the pain until there's no pain left. What does that process look like for someone afraid to confront their past wounds?
Right. Well, first off, the Buddhists will tell us that there's a difference between pain and suffering.
Yes.
Pain hurts. Suffering is a mental attitude that we impose on the pain. And so we don't have to feel suffering, but we do need to experience pain when it hurts, mentally or physically. I like the example of Scott, who is a writer and an editor, and his story is in the book. He said to me, I wasn't seeking pleasure, but I was seeking a relief from pain. And that's why he battled anxiety and particularly alcoholism. Alcohol started for him as magic. Then it became medicine. And then it turned to misery. So after 12 years of progressive drinking and 2 years of severe alcoholism, he found sobriety, found the right medication, and he learned to get comfortable being uncomfortable. And that's one of the challenges for people who are attached to pleasure, whether it's social media or overeating or whatever. They're not comfortable being uncomfortable. Until we develop that capacity to feel pain, we'll get stuck in this attachment.
Yeah. And I find myself in some of those same traps as well.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
lot of people do.
Yeah. Yeah. In reading this book and sort of applying some of these practices, I want to ask you, for someone that's doing this work, how can someone tell when they're operating from an attachment versus an aspiration? Are there any signs or milestones that indicate real growth?
Well, let me give an example, the attachment to youth,
Yeah.
because aging is a real paradox.
Mhm.
The attachment to youth is a real societal challenge. How can we shift from fearing aging to embracing a Japanese concept called wabi-sabi, which means the beauty of imperfection and impermanence? We oftentimes idealize our youth and we diminish our older citizens. And nowhere is this process more insidious than inside our heads. And rather than appreciate our aging minds and bodies, we ignore the many benefits of aging. And it can take many forms. You can yearn for youth, you can fear aging, you can be obsessed with illness and death, you can ignore your health and well being, or you can live an unhealthy lifestyle. And a lot of it is caused by internalized ageism. And research has said that people who struggle with internalized ageism, they take off approximately 8 years of their lives. So the secret is to age gracefully. That's the aspiration. So what do? We choose to live longer and better lives, healthier lives. We develop a self-awareness about conscious aging. We develop youthful personalities and we make sure that our environment is healthy. So these are the aspirations, the actions that help to deal with the attachment to youth.
Yeah, I appreciate you going through that with us. What I love about some of the examples that you're showing is these are really powerful stories. Your stories that you've outlined of transformation, including some of your own stories. And I want to ask you, as you sort of reflect on the book, are there any stories that, were your favorite? Any especially meaningful to you?
Well, they were all meaningful. I mean, it's amazing how wonderful these people were and being honest. and showing their own transformation and the pain that they dealt with. For example, there's David, who was an undersecretary of commerce, who shed his attachment to stability and overcame his fears of intimacy and change. There's Grace, who is a computer programmer who detached from her past and her deep anger toward her mother while aspiring to a more spiritual life with God. And then there's John, a healthcare attorney who got rid of his attachment to perfection and substance abuse and fell in love with his imperfections. So there are stories that really show what the attachment was and then how did they shed it to embrace the aspiration. There are thousands of examples in the world today where people show courage and get rid of their attachments. But one point I think is really important, and that is detach does not mean being uninvolved or disconnected. Quite the opposite. It's about ridding ourselves of the unhealthy energy that sits inside of us and allowing us to pursue our higher purpose, our values, the things we care about. For example, like democracy and the environment. And we get to choose between living a life of love or fear. And that's a real difference when it comes to being happy.
And you've done such a wonderful job of really empowering folks on how they can understand their own agency in seeing these attachments as well as crafting this world that align with their values and can feel a sense of empowerment to really make an influence there.
It's a really hard time right now in the
It
world.
is.
And people are feeling a lot more anxiety and they're searching for answers. And so many of these answers are simply inside their own head.
Yeah.
And we just need to make better choices and get rid of the attachments that are holding us down.
Yeah, and again, you're really kind of asking us to tap into that inner wisdom.
Exactly.
Yes.
That's a nice way of saying it. The inner wisdom and humanity that
And
exists inside each of us.
yeah. Well, I want to ask as we sort of come to the end of our show today, what's one simple practice that listeners can start today to begin their journey toward detachment?
Well, naturally, I'm an author, so one action would be to buy the book. It came out on April 29th, and in hardcover, in Kindle, and in audio that I actually did. So
What did you?
that was fun for me.
Yeah.
I think another thing is to go to bobrosen.com. We've
Okay.
created a pretty powerful assessment, the Detach inventory, which allows you to rate your attachments and then give you an elaborate analysis of how you rated and recommendations for what you can do to embrace aspirations across all 10 of those. And then we've also put together a free Detach book kit where people can develop book clubs reading Detach. So I'm excited about the impact it potentially can have.
Yeah, and you really gone the extra length of trying to make it a dialogue. Again,
Yeah.
one of the things you mentioned is really trying to get folks to tap into the relationships in their lives that can really enhance everybody else. And you've done so just with that book kit and really trying to get people to connect with others along your work.
I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
When you write a book, you never know who you touch and how you touch people. And this is my favorite of 8 books that I've written.
Oh,
And
really?
I hope it makes a small difference in people's lives.
Yeah, I want to sort of piggyback on that. As you write these books, what's the passion behind it? What really drives you to write these books?
It took me about 50 years for me to discover my higher purpose, which is to leave people that I touch a little bigger or a little better than I found them. I'm at the back end of my life. I mean, I'll be 70 this year, and I've had a great career, wonderful relationship and family. But at some point, you want to help people. And that's really what drives me. And I've learned a lot from, a life of business and a life of psychology. And I just want to share that with the rest of the world at this point in my life.
Well, I appreciate that, and I can really read your heart in that statement. You've done a wonderful job with your book. I know I've had a great time reading it, and you've done a really nice job of presenting the information around the aspiration, but providing a little bit of context with stories. And most importantly, you've provided reflection questions, which I really helped move the conversation out of the book and really trying to create some actionable steps for ourselves as I read it.
Thank you. I tried to
Yeah.
do that. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, I again want to give you an opportunity once more to let our listeners know where they can find your book, Detach, Ditch Your Baggage to Live a More Fulfilling Life, as well as follow your work.
Well, the book is everywhere on the internet now, and I'm excited about that. And then our products and services are on bobrosen.com. And sort of send me an email, bob@bobrosen.com, and tell me what you think of the book if you read it. I appreciate that.
Well, I hope our listeners will take you up on that. Again, I've had a lot of fun reading the book, and I look forward for our listeners to learn more about it. So, Bob, I really appreciate your time to speaking with us today. It was truly a pleasure.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Awesome. And I want to thank you, our listeners, for taking the time to join us. I want to remind you that you can follow us on our social media at Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, and even YouTube at Behavioral Health Today. If you like our show, give us 5 stars and leave us a review. That helps us show grow. And as always, the resources for this episode and an archive of all of our other episodes can be found on our webpage at triadhq.com/BHT. And we look forward to having you back with us next time on Behavioral Health Today. We appreciate all the support from our community, and if you like our show, one of the best ways you can support it is by giving us a 5-star rating and leaving a review. Behavioral Health Today is a podcast part of the Triad Behavioral Health Network, all rights reserved.